Okay, it's time to go on. Okay, to notice, okay, the first one is that there is a misunderstanding with the calendar. Thank you for the students that pointed it out. In the schedule of the class that we do not manage as teachers, but is the administration that writes it. And as you see, if you don't look inside, you don't even notice. They wrote team number 3, okay, tomorrow. But Professor Masala wrote team number 1 tomorrow. So I already said to Professor Masala of this problem, and he will put a notice, I think, saying that we start from team number 1, okay? So tomorrow is the first part of the class, from May to something else, okay? But we will put an additional note on the class board. Is it okay? Okay. As you see, they started from 3 and then 2 and then 1. That is not the regular order, so there is some mistake about that. So tomorrow, the first part of the class. Let's see if I can also read. Is it here, the schedule? Yes, they said, professor said group 1. Okay, so this is the important notice, okay, the main one. Okay. So, and the other correction is that someone pointed out that the sort function that I say here, okay, does not return undefined from here, does not return undefined, but as the reference says, sort returns a reference to the original array that is sorted. But let's say if you think that is undefined is better, because so you remember that sort is working in place, okay, and so it's modifying the original array. You call again, as in this example, the original array explicitly, and so on. Okay, so it's an error, but it's not so big. Okay, so let's go ahead with functional programming, because we also have to go through the dates. And so we said something about functional programming. Here there is a list of functional programming functions that are available for arrays. And let's see, we can start from this one. That is one of the most interesting, that is filter. As I said, it goes through the array. Let's see if we have another example. Okay. Filter is a function that is called on an array, this one. Okay. And it creates a new array where this array is made by all the elements of the original one that pass the test. What is the test? The test is what is implemented by this callback. this function that is given to the filter function. If this function returns true, or let's say a truly result, the elements is included in the new array. If it returns false, it's not included. Okay, this callback inside the filter within a loop is called for every element of the original array. So X will be 5 the first time, 4 the second time, and so on. So what happens is that if the test is X lower than 3, this 5 does not pass, use another color, 5 does not pass the test, 4 does not pass the test, 3 does not pass the test, 2 and 1 pass the test. And so the new array is made of 2 and 1. Okay, it returns a new array with 2 and 1. Let's say in our example, we can create a filter function. We can use a filter function defined on the array, but we can also create our filter function. So for example, if we move this code to a function that is called myFilter, that gets a vector and a callback. Okay. Okay, let's keep this code here for reference. And then assume we were using our myFilter function. Okay. We say that this function works on this array, and we give this function a callback that we are going to define. Okay, leave place for the callback. So what happens? It happens when I call my filter, I give the vector, and so this dot list will be a generic array that on which I go through, and for every element I do a test. Okay, the test is done by the callback, and the callback to do a test on the current element of the array must be called with an argument that is the current element of the array. So our filter function is something like that. Okay, a function that goes through an array, and for every element of the array performs a test given that value. So if I'm going to write here a filter function, the filter function will be something that receives an answer and tests the answer. The test should be true if the answer respondent is equal to name. The same things we wrote here. Okay, but as you see, in this case, the test is given by an outer function. Okay, and except for this vector, because here is a function and here is a method, the filter function on the array works pretty the same. Okay, is a loop on every element and performs this test for every element. If the test is passed, the new vector, we add the element in the new vector, otherwise not. Okay, and so this is the idea of writing in with functional programming. Let's say we don't need to resort to our filter function, custom filter function, because the arrays already have a filter function. So I can write this dot find all equal to name, but I will call this dot list dot filter. Okay, this is the filter function provided by JavaScript that I run as a method over an array. That is the array of the answer inside the question. And how does it work? I need to provide the test. So, as I wrote before, test if the current answer dot respondent is equal to name. Okay, we changed, let's say, how we wrote the filter method, but the behavior is the same, the name of the function and the arguments are the same, so I suppose we can also run the code and see the terminal. I don't want to create a new one. Here it is. Something find all is not a function. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Here is Enrico and so on. If I change and I write Antonio, it works. Okay. So another important function is the map. Okay, filter is used to filter elements of the array. Map is used to transform element of the array. So map goes through each element of the array on which it is invoked. Each element is given to the function, to the callback, and the returned value is put in the new array. So x is the value of the previous array. You get x in the callback, you compute x times x, and 1 times 1 is 1. Then you get 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 3, 3 times 3 is 9. Okay? Simple as that. So it's used to transform the values in the array. Another thing that it is also useful is, for example, okay, let's do something like that. Q1 dot find all Antonio. Okay, dot map. Let's write on console log. Let's say answer Q1 answer text. Let's suppose you are interested not in the whole answer, but just on the text of the answer. Okay? You can use map to transform the elements of this array that are answers in string of text. How can you do that? You get an answer, an object that it is an answer, and you return just the property. Okay? The new array is built just with the text property. So the order of the elements will be the same, but you strip out, you remove everything else. You see? Hello world and fine. Okay? So you transform the object. Okay? You can transform in other way, in something else. You can also write something like that. And so you get answer text is this. And then you do dot join, something like that. And you get the new line. Okay, you get just a string because you join all together, separated by new line. Okay, that's another important part of JavaScript function. For another point, for each is almost like sort, does not behave very well. Okay, yeah, it is. It receives a callback that is invoked once for each element of the array, for example. The problem is that this for true returns undefined, and this is not chainable because of that. And then you cannot stop or break for each other than throwing an exception. So you can see some examples. It's almost like a loop, but written in a functional programming way. The interest point about this slide is that the callback, in this case, on the function defined over the array, are not given just the current value, but also two more arguments. Okay, JavaScript does not complain if you don't put these arguments in the prototype of the function, but you may use or not use them. The additional two arguments are the index of the element in the array and the array itself. Okay, sometimes the array can be useful, for example, to get the length. You can write a filter function that gets only the element that are in the first half of a vector, let's say, for example. Okay, so filter advanced.js. Okay, you have a vector with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you have console.log v.filter, and the inner function receives the current element, the index, and the whole vector. Console.log, see, oh, let's put it together for simplicity. Okay. Sorry, I put too many console log. I love them. I suggest you to use a lot console log when you are debugging your program, you are writing your program. Filter advanced. Okay, you see the element position 0 is 1, the element in position 1 is 2, the element in position 2 is 3, and so on. Okay, and for example, you can get the length, that is dot length. Okay, that is 5. So you can write something if E is less than v dot length divided by 2 as false. Okay, and you put this log again. Let's see if it works. Okay, so in this case, you have a filter function that is different from the previous one. It doesn't work really with the content of the current element. It is designed to do a tricky things with the other arguments. It is the position of the element and the vector. From the vector, you get the length. From the index, you get the position. And so you just return the first half of the vector. You don't look at the content. It's exactly the opposite of what we did before. So the idea is that, remember, you can use all this information in the callback. The callback is given the value of the current element, the index, and the vector, both in the filter, both in the map, and also in the other functions. Okay, just go to the reference to see how it works. Okay, and then, oh, this is really interesting. This is another function that is defined on the array, but is a lot different from the previous one. This is called reduce. Okay, what happened is that instead of returning an array, remember, map was returning an array with the same number of elements, but transformed. Filter was returning an array with a different number of elements, but the same, present or not present. Reduce is returning just one element. Okay? When you might be interested in doing a reduce on an array, you would like to compute the sum of the numbers in an array. Okay? You don't want the enumeration of the number. You want just one result. So this is called reduction. I take all the elements and I build a single one. For example, for the sum, what do you need to do a sum of the element of a vector? The current value and how do you call the other variable? How do you write a sum? A plus equal V. Okay, you accumulate the values of the single element into a variable that you may call accumulator. Okay, and reduce does exactly that. It builds an accumulator. Okay, so in this case, the callback that you use in the reduce as is this one. And as before, you have the current value, you have the index, you have the array. But important, the first element is the accumulator. Okay, I always write this function like this, A, C, something. So I remember that the first element is the accumulator and the second one is the current value. Okay. So the reduce function gets the callback plus, this is different from the previous one, an initial value. For example, for the sum, you start from 0. If you have to multiply each element of a vector, you start from 1. You multiply 1 for the first element, 1 for the second, and the result for the second, and so on. Okay? So you would like to specify the initial value. What is the meaning of the syntax? Why you have square braces here? It means that it's optional, okay? You can also not provide the initial value. So what happens if you do not provide the initial value? For example, for the sum, if I do not provide 0 to do the sum of the element of a vector, from what can I start? The first element. So the first element is the initial value, and the accumulation starts from the second, and so on. Okay? So it's important to remember that. So here is an example. We can write an example with the summation. Okay, the simple example about the summation is this one. You have a vector, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. You call reduce on this vector. So several times you get the function, the callback called with an accumulator and a current value. Okay? At the beginning, the accumulator is 0. So what happens is that you are called with 0 and the first element. This is the first call. So in this case, in the accumulator, you would like to put a plus 0 plus 5. Okay, so in the next call, the accumulator is the 0 plus 5, and you get 4. And so in the accumulator, you would like to put 5, that is the accumulator, plus 4, that is the current value. And is 9. The next call will be 9 and 3. And so you do 9 plus 3. Okay? What does it mean? It means that for every call, you do A plus C. Okay? But remember, you need to return that. Okay? This syntax with the arrow and accumulator plus value means I return the sum. Okay? Why do I stress this point? Because sometimes you will put the curly braces before and after this computation. If you put the curly braces, you omit the return, okay? Because with them, you have to write explicitly return. So remember that you need to return. The return value from every callback is used as an accumulator in the next call. If you don't remember to return the accumulator, you return undefined, and the next call will start with undefined and a value. Okay, this is a common error of the reduce. Okay, and there are other examples, but I think you can see them. You can see them in the labs. If you don't look at the next slide, I give you an exercise. Let's try to do that. Here it is. Here is the exercise. You are given this data structure, an array with all those values, this element, and you are asked to find out the average price, so the average of this column, but only the average price of the sub. So you have to exclude all the other type of car, get only the price of the cars that are of type SUV, and do the average. Okay, so it's a filter, it's a reduce to compute the average, and maybe it's another function. Okay, would you like to try that? You can try that also on paper, and I'm providing you with a QR code, and you can post your answer in using this QR code in this Padlet. Okay, let's see how many answers. It's anonymous. I will not check them, but I would like to see how many we can gather in this class. Okay, so try to do that on paper. I can show you both the QR code and the exercise. No. Okay. So don't copy all the data. Maybe just 2 rows, and try to write a piece of code that goes through this array of vehicles, selects only the sub, and computes the price, and then prints out the average. Yes, you are given 10 minutes, not so much. Don't be afraid. Send something to the web page so we collect as many answers as possible. It's 3 rows of code. Are you trying? If you have any question, you can ask. So we can check if I missed some information during the presentation. Will you choose to do the average inside the reduce or outside? You may also just compute the sum and do the average outside. Oh, probably there is already some. Okay, someone put the result. I would like to see, take a picture of your code or a screenshot. Okay, so you press plus and you can, I hope you can also publish your screenshot if I shared correctly with you. Yeah, I think so. I saw some of you cheating with the calculator. I want evidence of the code. Can I see? Small filter, reduce. And I might suggest some other solution. I'm sorry, I don't have, you can use the plus to post another column so it's more readable. Filter and map. Okay. You break the chaining. after two of them. Yeah, you can also chain everything together. Okay. This is another one. Okay. This is a filter, then a map that gets only the price, and a reduce that sums and divides by the number of elements. And here there is the precedence, I think. You just sum the price divided by the number of elements, okay? Because you do the division before the summation. Okay, fine. If I remember right, Professor Masala already had a solution that was something like that. Okay, it was exactly, I think, as the answer I saw before. Okay, so the idea is to get a list of vehicles, to filter them so that you get only the sub, so a limited 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 elements. So you get a new vector with only 5 elements, you extract the price, you have a vector of 5 numbers, and you do the reduce, where you accumulate not the price, but the price divided by the number of elements. Okay? And so you get the average at the end. Is it okay? Any question? Okay. If you would like just to have the sum here, and then divide after for the length, is not an error. Okay, it's just a different approach. Okay, this is pure functional chaining and so on, but it's not an error to do differently. Okay, I'm sorry I don't have so much time today. We finished the slides about the functional programming, and to be able to complete our exercise, we need to introduce another topic, that is the date library. Okay, because we have some function, some methods after date and list by date that we cannot do with our current implementation because our date is just a string. Okay, an approach could be to give this string to the data constructor of JavaScript, and so in JavaScript we can have strings, numbers, object, and dates. Okay, dates is another type, is built-in object type of JavaScript. Dates are very important to write program, but they are also very difficult to manage. And people invented a lot of libraries that improve date management with respect to the native date object of JavaScript. Okay, and almost nobody uses the date object. It's not so well implemented. If you go online, you find that, for example, depending on how you write the date, the constructor behaves like the date is expressed in local time or in UTC and so on. It's a complete mess. So we start by suggesting to forget the date object, the JavaScript date object, and start from a library. Okay, the library is called Dayjs. There is a lot of libraries for dates in JavaScript, and we started using this one. Sorry, not Dayjs, Dayjs, this one. It's a small library compatible with a library that was used a lot but become too big for using that in web pages, but that must be very small and fast to download. And so now most of the users use Dayjs. But to introduce Dayjs, we need to talk about JavaScript packages. You already, I think you are used to pip, that is the package for Python, the packet management system or tool for Python. In JavaScript, we have npm node, no, npm, this one. Okay, there are plenty of library, Dayjs, okay, this is the reference to Dayjs. Okay, there are few points to stress before starting with the library. Okay, the first thing, to use a library, we need to create a project, and inside the project, a list of dependencies that are a list of the libraries we are using in this project. Okay, so what happens is that we need to initialize our folder with npm init. Okay, and when you run npm init, it creates an important file that is this one that is package.json. It is like a manifest for the project that is initialized with some silly properties that usually you just hit return and forget about them when you create that, and with another more important part that is the libraries you are using. Okay, so let's start with that. We can use the same folder, it's not a problem. As you see, we are in this folder, week 02. Okay, there is 1, 2, and 3 JS file. Look at what happened when I run npm init. Okay, there are some silly questions. Name of your project, I just hit return, version, don't care, description, not at all. And they call for an entry point. Here they see that I already have a JavaScript file. Otherwise, it's common to use index.js. Okay, so we specify index.js and something else. Okay, it's okay. They created this package.json. Okay, the interesting part is that they would like to have some like a main, if you remember C programming, a main file, a main function that is invoked at start. In our case, in this case, it's not so important. And at the moment, you do not see any list of dependency. Okay, the dependency began when you write npm install and the name of the library. In our case, is Dayjs. So what happens? It happens that something is executed and a new folder is created, node modules. Inside this folder, there will be a folder with your library and as many other folders as the dependencies of your library. Dayjs is self-included. Other libraries like React gets together 200 megabytes of code, okay? A huge amount of code. But you don't care about this folder. Okay, at this point, if I look at the package.json, I see that there is this dependency, Dayjs. Okay, so from this manifest, npm can know which are the libraries that are useful in my project. For example, if you push this project to Git, you do not include the node modules. As you see in the git ignore, I put to ignore some visual code things and also the node modules folder. Why? Because if I erase this folder, delete, okay, I can build again the dependencies using npm install. Okay, npm installs looks at the package.json file, sees that there are some libraries required for my project and installs them. Okay, so when you give your program to the other people or the project at the end of this class, you just give your code and the libraries will be downloaded afterwards. Okay. If we go into the index.js file, okay, how can we use the library? Okay, we need to tell, this is not, to tell JavaScript that we import, we require the library, Dayjs. And we do that with this expression that says import require the library Dayjs, and from this library get this variable, this object. In the case of Dayjs is a function. Okay, so with this function we can use all the peculiarities of the library. With this function we can create a date object, and this date object has a lot of methods we can use to manage the dates. Okay, so I will write use strict const. You can give any name to this variable, but usually you give the same name of the library, so you remember that. Require Dayjs. And then const now equal Dayjs. Console log now. Okay, node index. A new date is created. This is the internal representation of the object provided by the debugger, and the date is today at 2:43, that is 3:43 in local time. Okay, so what happens is that we can use for example some methods on the dates to do whatever we want. For example, the format method to print a string instead of the object. There is a default format in this case. This is the this ISO format, but you can specify different ones. For example, yeah, you can look at the reference. You find plenty of information about the syntax you can use to express data in different formats. You can create dates that if you call Dayjs, let's say the constructor, without anything, any parameter, you get the time, the current time. If you give a string, the ISO format string, you can define a date object corresponding to that particular time. And you can create a Dayjs object also from a JavaScript date object and so on. There are a lot of possibility with which you can create dates. In our example, if we go to the quick question and answer case example, we can import the library, Dayjs, and when we create a new answer or a new question, what happens that we get a string and we create a Dayjs object. Okay, so from the string we create a Dayjs object. So we do not save into the property of the question a string, but an object, Dayjs object. And the same we can do with the answers. Where are they? Answer. We do Dayjs date. If I'm right, it does not require any new in front of that. Okay. And maybe we can check the syntax. I hope it's correct. Maybe this the month, year, month, and day, I suppose. Node Q&A. Okay, as you see, when it prints the date, it prints the Dayjs object. Okay, so this way we can, for example, when we filter, we go through the list of answers. Every answer has some text property plus a date, the date of the answer. And we can work with that. Let's see what we can do. Oh, okay, here there are different syntax. There is some getter and setter for the dates, but are quite trivial. The interesting point are this one, sorry. And then there are some additional information about the Dayjs library. It's modular. It has the possibility to work with plugin. Okay, all the plugins are downloaded when you install the library, but not all the plugin code is imported in your source code to keep it very small. You have to explicitly say that you require a plugin to use some functionality. Okay, they are already installed in the node modules folder, but they are not included in your code. You need to explicitly say that you require, for example, some function that manage the leap years and so on. Okay, but I don't think we will need them tomorrow. And so those are some of the functions we can use with the dates. So never manipulate the Dayjs object with your code. Always rely on the libraries. For example, if you would like to add one day to a date, you create the date and then use the method add. You specify the amount and the measure. You can add a day, you can add an hour, you can add a month. Okay, this is called a unit. If you go to the reference, you will see how unit you can use. Okay, here is an example with a day, with a year, with an hour, and so on. Both for the add and for the subtract. In this case, year with a value sets the year. Okay. Here, it's another important function, diff. It subtract is a difference between this date and this one. Okay, you say, I would like to compute the difference of I think D1 minus D2, and get the result in some unit. For example, I would like the difference in days, in hour, also in weeks. Okay? If the difference in weeks is 0, it means that the 2 dates are in the same week, are less than 7 days apart, I would think. Okay? For example, instead of the difference, you can use is before, is after, is between, or is same. Let's try to use some of them. For example, the exercise says that we have to build a function that is called after date. This method returns an array of answers after the given date. Okay, so if we go to the code after date, we can add to the question a method, this dot after date. Okay, it receives a date and over the list filters them. Okay, it's just a function that filters the list of answers. Okay, and so it is going to get an answer and look at the date that has to be compared some way with the date that is given as an argument. Okay, the text says returns an array of answers which date is after the given date. So we will write that the answer date dot, because it's a Dayjs object, is after the given date. Okay, we go in the code and we can write console.log q1 dot after date. Dayjs means now. Subtract 1 day, that is yesterday. And we have to return the answers, so we don't have to use math. I think this is of yesterday, and this is of yesterday, 02. And probably we had, okay. Okay, it depends, yeah. It's considering this, it filters out this one, okay? Because it's not after yesterday, this one. These are after yesterday, okay? So you just see this one and this one, okay? Remember, we set the day, not the time. So it's using midnight, okay? This is the UTC time. That means that this date has been considered as Italian time. And so the date that is saved in the object is the Italian time -1. Okay, this is the value that is saved. This is the value that is printed out because it's read and written in Italian time. Okay, you have to do some practice with the date. Another function we may want to write is list by date. We need to return an array of answer, a copy, array of answer, sorted by increasing date. So list by date means that this dot list by date, we do not receive any date. We return, in case of this dot list dot sort, okay? But since sort returns the same array, we create a copy. So we copy the list and then return that. So make a copy and sort. Is it right? Yes. And so sort requires a callback that is given 2 answers. And so we need to get the first one and compute the difference with the second one. Okay, we are lucky because the diff method of Dayjs behaves like the sort, the function required by sort. It returns a negative value if A is before B, the same value is if it's equal, and a positive value if A is after B. Okay, so it's working fine. Okay, so you just have to look at the reference for Dayjs. It's quite a lot of documents. For example, the parse is here. Okay, if you would like to give dates written in some specific format, you have to include this plugin. Otherwise, the dates from which it creates some Dayjs object is a string in ISO format. Then you have some function to subtract, add the function start of time. For example, you may query which date is the start of this week. So I get today and I ask start of not year but week. It tells me that today is also the start of the week. If I do the same query tomorrow, it will say that the day before was the start of the week, and so on. So this is also important function. The format for the display and the different function is before, and so on. So one last thing, if I remember right, about Dayjs, I already said that it's small, works also in the browser. Remember, Dayjs objects are immutable. A new one is created every time. Okay, supports localization and plugins. And I think it's almost everything. Okay, so this is a very quick introduction on this library, but obviously you will have to read the documentation to be able to use that thoroughly. And we almost finished this exercise. I will publish the complete solution also with this last function that is list by score. I had another function. Okay, not required. And we almost finished this this exercise. So tomorrow we will build a JavaScript program with Node.js. Have you already installed Node on your PC? Most of you, okay? If you have any problem tomorrow, you can ask. I provide you instruction for WSL, Windows subsystem for Linux in Windows or Linux or anything else. We will create a film library that almost equal to an answer library. Okay, there is not so much difference. Okay, any question at the end? I don't see any other professor approaching. That's all?
Concerning the handling of time zones, does this function read the time zone of the machine or the real time?
Yeah, the library knows the time zone of the machine. So when you give a string, it reads the string in that time zone. Okay, so if I write 15 dot semicolon 01, it means 3 o'clock now, but it stores UTC time, so now minus 1 hour. And when it prints the date, gets the time local zone, the time zone of the machine, and adds or subtract the given amount of time with respect to UTC. So prints and reads in local zone, time zone, but stores in UTC time zone. Okay, that's the usual approach. Any other question? Okay, so have a nice day. See you tomorrow. Bye.